Welcome to the Engineering Our Future podcast, a podcast where I bring you relevant content from personal experience and guests to help young engineers, students, and international students succeed in their careers. So I'll just introduce myself just briefly for those of you that this is the first time seeing me. I'm a structural engineer working in Boulder, Colorado. I work for a bridge company doing like bridge demolition and bridge reconstruction and a lot of temporary structures. And then, today I'm just going to be talking about some of the things I've learned as a student. I'm still pretty young in the career, just 3-4 years out of school. So, I mean, still learning a ton, but I've been able to just volunteer with organizations like ASCE, SEI, and EWB, and just kind of share kind of my experiences through those organizations. So first, I just want to kind of talk to you kind of where I came from and kind of my background. So I'm originally from Colombia. I came to the US back in 2012, played tennis for South Dakota State University. And that's how we ended up in South Dakota. And I got my bachelor's and my master's from South Dakota State. And during my research, I did like the inspection of bridges and drones. So it was a really interesting research. But the main part of that story was I didn't really get a structural engineer job until I graduated my master's degree. So I spent the good part of my undergrad and grad school trying to find jobs as a structural engineer, but I wasn't able to find anything. Just different circumstances. Being an international student made just things a lot harder to find jobs in the US outside of school. So all of those things kind of add up, and I was able to, instead of finding my dream job as a structural engineer, I was able to work as a student operator for the city wastewater treatment plant. I work in maintenance and custodial for the university during a few summers. I also work as a quality control technician for a ready-mix company, just doing like concrete testing and just really long hours. I remember being at the job site at early 4 in the morning and not leaving until like 6 or 7 p.m. So really long hours and not really what I was passionate about. But I was grateful that I had those jobs because they really taught me the value of being on time for work, working in teams, and all these other skills that I knew I was going to use once I graduated and find my structural engineer career after that. So it was definitely tough not to be able to find a job in structural engineer, but it was a good lesson that in life is not what you want, it's kind of what you're given. And I was a good student. I had really good grades as an international student. I was involved with EWB and ASCE in different projects, different teams. And despite all of that, and maybe even having better grades than other people that I knew were in my class, I wasn't able to find this job that I really wanted. So sometimes it's just hard as an international student, and that's how I saw it at the time. But at the same time, I look back and right now, knowing that what I was able to accomplish as a student and seeing the other people that were able to find a job, and sometimes just ask myself, like, was it because I was a student, as an international student? Was it because I didn't have the right permits? All of these questions kind of started crippling in my head. But and kind of now looking back, I just realized that it was just harder for international students to get into those jobs, and that was a lesson that I had to learn early on in my career, and was able to take some value out of it and just develop myself into the professional that I am right now. So kind of moving on, some of the lessons that I learned kind of when I was a student, the first thing was don't be afraid to move on and find the career that you're really passionate about. And obviously for me, that wasn't the case when I was starting as a student, but I understood that those were the jobs available to me that were going to help me kind of later on in my career. Again, work hard for the opportunities you have right now, because those are the careers that are going to help you kind of later on. And obviously it may seem like a burden right now and something you don't really want to do right now, but at the end of the day, when you look back, it's easy to connect the dots and look that those opportunities you had then were the ones that really give you the skills and all the knowledge that you needed to be where you are right now. And I think the last kind of lesson that I learned from all these struggles to find kind of my first job was that sometimes we don't really understand why everything is happening at the moment. And again, it's kind of easier to look back and connect the dots and understand where those fit into the bigger story of your career and as a student and everything. But at the time, it just feels like you're going nowhere. And I think with that, I just want to kind of highlight some of the things that I was able to accomplish. Again, I come from Colombia, so as an international student, there was a lot of challenges kind of early on in my career, from again getting my visa, my work permit, all of the stuff. But the culture shock, the maybe like rejection when you're a student and you're misunderstood because of your background, your culture, and everything. I was able to last year become one of the 10 new faces of civil engineering, which is a huge recognition by the American Society of Civil Engineers. I've been able to be part of like national committees and leadership, business practices, all these committees that are helping the structural engineering profession. And it's because of all the hard work that I put as a student and kind of early on in my career. Some of them are like committees that people reach out to me to be part because of who I am right now and what I've been able to accomplish. And the last thing is just being able to help small communities in South and Central America for over 5-6 years now, with their water problems, through Engineers Without Borders. And I think that's one of the highlights of everything I've done, just because I'm really passionate about just helping these communities and know where I come from, a country that is obviously a developed country, and we have a lot of struggles with poverty and everything. Being able to use the knowledge that I have right now as a structural engineer to help all their communities that really need it right now, especially with COVID and the hurricanes. This past year, a lot of communities in Central America are really hurting and suffering, and we've been able to help them through Engineers Without Borders. So those kind of some of the things that I've been able to accomplish kind of after I graduated from school, and some of the things I've been able to do kind of early on in my career that really show that despite of where you're coming from, I mean, coming from Colombia was definitely not easy. The culture shock, all the troubles and rejection kind of early on, and a small school in South Dakota that 99% of people don't really know it exists. I've been able to do all these things just because of some of these skills that I've able to develop and learn kind of early on in my career. So I just want to give you like 5 skills that I've been able to both develop and just recognize that are important for engineers. And I've been able to talk with many engineers through a podcast that I host, the Engineering Future podcast, and I keep hearing these skills back and back every episode. And I'm just gonna list them. And the surprising thing is that none of these skills relate to the classes and the technical knowledge that you're doing right now. So skills like teamwork, communication, perseverance, dealing with difficult people, like personal organization. These are skills that, as engineers, it's very valuable that we develop them. And looking back, these skills really showed up strongly in those careers and in those jobs that I had as a student that I thought they were the worst jobs that I could get at that point, because they were outside of structural engineering. So teamwork in the maintenance crew, I just remember being with groups of 10, 15 people, and we had to collaborate and do going around the dorms and fixing stuff, for example. Communication, being part of those teams and making sure everyone's doing the right thing at the right time, talking with them, talking with the supervisors, making sure everything was getting done when it needed to get done was super important. Again, perseverance. All these jobs were jobs I did not like at that time. I just wanted to find a job in civil engineering or structural engineering, but I knew that those were the jobs available to me at that time. And by being perseverant in the things that I was doing with them, I was developing all these other skills that were going to help me once I graduated. Dealing with difficult people, and this was mainly during my grad school, just dealing with a difficult advisor that really challenged me. And looking back, I mean, it was a blessing that he was the way he was, challenging me all the time, kind of going against the ideas that I had, and just really putting to test all the knowledge I was finding through my research. And you'll find very soon that after you graduate, your boss may be a tough boss, your coworker may be a tough coworker, and you're gonna find difficult people that you're gonna have to deal with once you graduate. And lastly, it was personal organization. Just honestly, the best thing I could have done when I graduated was just making sure I'm writing everything down, everything I do at work, and everything I'm learning. If I do a new calculation, I save that in a special place where I can always reference it back and see it, and do the same calculation over and over, because you don't really want to come to your boss and ask the same question twice. It's one of the worst things you can do, because that shows you don't really care. You're not really paying attention to what you're doing. So be organized. Write everything down that you can possibly have. It will serve you really well as an engineer. And then the last thing just want to leave you with are some of the lessons that I learned through all of this. So again, ask a lot of questions early on, making sure that you are at least trying to find the solution before you come to your boss. Spend 5-10 minutes just brainstorming maybe a solution, and it doesn't have to be perfectly right, but if you have an idea where you're going with the question, rather than coming to your boss with an empty page without any information, they're not going to be able to help you properly, and it's just a waste of time for them, and it's going to be a waste of time for you. Again, keeping record of everything you do, calculations, keeping track of like emails you send clients, it will serve you really well, especially if you're in a job that is considered like high risk, and you may need to prove that you did certain calculation or that you communicated certain design. It will help you stay organized and just save basically everything so you can represent later on in a career. Getting involved with professional organizations, that was something I didn't really do much when I was an undergrad. I was really involved with Engineers Without Borders, somewhat involved with ASCE, but I wish I was more involved with ASCE, because I really found the value of being involved with ASCE after I graduated, and I never did concrete canoe, I never did like steel bridge competition, and it's something that I really wish I had done. But as an international student, I have like no idea what ASCE was. I just thought it was this college club where you just kind of get together, eat pizza, and really don't do much. But I really found the value of the organization kind of after I graduated, and just tell every student that I meet that it's one of the best things you can do in your career, because it's going to help you develop those skills that you're going to use once you graduate. It's going to grow your network. I mean, once you graduate, all of you guys are going to know each other, and if you need to find a job, you have all this network already of people that you have spent so much time building the concrete canoe or all these activities, and it's going to be a lot easier to maybe find a new job if you find yourself looking for a job. Finding the why of your motivation was one of the biggest things I learned early on. And once you find out why you're doing the things you're doing, the how you accomplish those things is going to come more naturally. So it was obvious to me that I wanted to work in structural engineering, but at the time I couldn't find the right job that was going to help me work in structural engineering. So finding the why I wanted to do that showed me that how I got there, it didn't really matter as long as I was going to find that job at the end. Never letting others define who you are. It was a huge thing for me, because I was a very shy, introverted international student when I came here. I would have never imagined talking to a group of students or speaking at conferences and doing all of these things as an international student, just because of who I was before I came here. And I didn't want people seeing that side of me and knowing that I could do much more with the knowledge I had, and not letting people like define who I was. I just wanted to pursue the person I wanted to be as an engineer, as someone that is helping students, helping engineers, helping all these communities kind of all over the world. And that's how I wanted to be seen in the eyes of other people. So not let other people define who you are, find who you want to be, and then just become that person. And the last thing was perseverance in everything you love. And as long as you work hard and you find something you really love and you put all the time and effort into that, the doors will open. And this is something I really saw, because, again, I come from a really small school in South Dakota, an international student that, if you know the stats in STEM, Latinos are a really, really small minority of the workforce. But by working hard, I was just putting myself out there, and people started noticing, reaching out to me to talk at conferences, reaching out to me to be part of committees. So all these opportunities kind of came from my passion of helping others and helping communities and helping students and doing all these things that I'm doing. So as long as you persevere, you work hard for what you want, I think doors will open really easily, and people are going to start noticing you. And the last thing I just wanted to share with you is I reached out to a few friends on social media and asked them what advice they had for students. And again, I wasn't surprised when most of them were really similar to what I've already shared with you. So let me just read you 6 of them that I got. So from Stephanie Lohner, she is a engineering recruiter that spent many years working in the chemical engineering field in oil and gas and has a lot of experience in that field. And her advice was to be punctual is a sign of respect. And I can see that because she's also a Latina. And if you know anything about Latinos, we're very well known for always being late to anything. So being punctual is a sign of respect and something that I both have learned to appreciate more. And it's really discouraging when people are not punctual and yeah, it's kind of discouraging. So being punctual is a sign of respect. Another comment was from Daniela Schroeder. She's a bridge engineer from Pennsylvania. She's really involved with the Society of Women Engineers, with SEI and other organizations. And her advice was, don't be afraid to ask questions. Your team is going to be there to support you. And again, going back to the ask a lot of questions, keep a record of everything you do, make sure you are asking questions, because that's why you have a supervisor. That's why you have a boss that is helping you become the best engineer you can be. And you need to learn to ask the right questions when you come to them, and just don't be afraid to ask the questions, because that's one of their duties, is answer the questions that you have. Another comment from Naomi Berry. She's a person that I met online. She has a nice Instagram page, the civil grad. She wrote, write things down, have paper handy so that you don't have any question, so you don't have the same question twice. Again, this comes back to make sure you have a good record of everything you do, every calculation, everything, so you can have a big record of everything you do, and you're not asking the same question twice. From Jeff Castillo, he says, take time to think about the questions before you ask them. Again, making sure you're not wasting your boss's time or your time. From Zach and Max from the Structural Engineer podcast. If you want to be a structural engineer, this is an amazing podcast to follow. They're super nice guys. And they say, find a good mentor and a company that will invest in you. And this was a really interesting one, because a lot of times we think of the company finding you and looking to hire you, but at the same time, you need to be finding companies that will invest the time in you, and finding a company is the right fit for you, rather than them just kind of reaching out and trying to find you. The last one was by Chi Tsung Kao. Hopefully I'm saying his name correctly. And he says, you will use most of what you learn in your classes. And to add to that, I think it's really important to understand that for me, it was surprising that I did use everything I learned in classes, but I used it in a different way once I graduated. Because once you graduate, you are going to have a lot more tools at your disposal, a lot of analysis programs, spreadsheets that your company may have, and you still need to know the basics of the engineering that you're learning in school, but you're going to use it in a completely different way, coordinated with contractors, with different fields of engineering that is going to be bring like a different challenge to that equation. So those are 6 really great advice from people that I just follow online, and was happy to just share those knowledge with you. And yeah, that's kind of all I had. I don't know if you guys have any questions. I'm happy to answer them. You can always email me. John, you can share your email, or you can visit my website at luisfelipeduque.com, and I have a lot of information there for students and young engineers. I'm happy to connect.
What I really want to know is how do you get them to call you back after a second round interview?
The things they're looking for. So I will say, like, you need to do a really good research about the position you want to be part of. And if you look at their like job posting, you're gonna have a lot of like keywords that they're looking for. So someone that can solve X and Y thing, or you can find like different keywords that they use maybe more than once during that job posting. If you tailor your resume to match those keywords, you have a better chance of like at least them reaching out on the first time. And if you show them during the first interview that you have done a really good research about the company, and they often have like their mission and vision statement somewhere in the site, their company culture and everything, they are looking for someone that is gonna fit their company. They're not really looking to hire the best civil engineer they can get out of school. They're looking for someone they can both train. So you gotta show that you are very flexible and someone that is willing to learn, and you gotta show them that you know the company well enough that you can basically, if you the way you talk and the words they use are matching all these words and keywords they use on their site or their job application, they are going to see that you are going to be a really good fit for the company. Both you have researched the company well enough to know what they do and all the things they're looking for their company culture, as well as show them that you are someone that's going to fit right in the team without them having to spend a lot of time training you or spend a lot of time dealing with all the things that may be hard for them to deal early on your career.
Okay. If so, like, if someone was to ask you an interview style question, like, when was a time you were presented with two choices or two or more choices that were all suboptimal, how did you choose between them? I've had questions like that. I mean, and it's hard for me to know, especially on the fly, like what they're really after. I think it's just like, oh, can you crisis management? Can you like assign metrics and data to things and then evaluate from there? I don't know. How do you handle like weird interview questions?
I don't think I've ever been asked that question. So I would say that they're probably more after trying to figure out if you're going to be a problem at the company. So if you answer the question in a way that they know you're going to be a problem in their company culture. So that's why it's so important to know the company well and like do some research on like their company culture. Like if you go to any of these big companies' websites, you're going to find all about what they are about, the things they care about, and all of these things that they've done. What they're after with those questions is to see if you're going to be a problem and are going to contradict their company culture. And I always tell students that you can always gear the conversations towards what you want them to ask you. So thinking about your answer that's going to lead them to a question that you want to answer.
You're looking into a company and you really like them, and you see somebody who is an alumni, but you don't know them. Is it weird to reach out and be like, hey, we went to the same school. How was your experience getting into this job or something like that, even though you don't know them?
I don't think it's weird. I mean, just reach out to them and just be authentic and just share that you are from the same school. And I wouldn't say like ask them like right away, like this is like, please help me find this job. I wouldn't phrase it that way, but you can maybe ask them questions about the company. Like, do they like the company? Do they think it's a right fit for like what they're doing? Like get to know him or her and the company before you can ask them to like help me get into this position.
How do you know what you want when you're looking at these companies? How are you evaluating like this would be a good company to work for outside of like they specialize in an area of expertise that I'm interested in? What are some like red flags or green flags for you?
So for me, I really wanted to be in a company that was going to be challenging and the job wasn't going to be boring. Like I didn't want to be in the desk doing the same calculation over and over. I wanted a company that showed me that they care about me volunteering with these organizations. So they were supportive of me being active in ASCE and SCI and all these kind of organizations. And I wanted a company where I knew that maybe not like right away, but maybe within the near future, I was going to be able to climb the corporate ladder and become like a project manager or someone that has a little more responsibility within the company. So those were things that I value when I first started the company. When I first started this company, what you value may be a completely different. You may care more about vacation days, or you may care more about who you're working with than these other things. So again, it's kind of important for you to find what you really value, and then find a company that is basically giving you that.
For like a lot of us that kind of go into like their first job, and depending on the experience, some may hate it and some may like think that like that kind of job line isn't for them. Have you kind of ever had that experience, or you kind of like you kind of go to work and you see someone doing a different job and you're kind of like, I'd rather do that than do what I'm doing right now? Like, how do you kind of battle that, and how do you kind of to keep what you're doing and make it seem like you're not wasting your degree?
And sometimes that's the case. Sometimes you start a job that you don't really like and you thought it was going to be something different. But that's one of the good things of being so young, that we can just switch careers early on and maybe experiment a little bit. I've switched jobs. I think I counted like 5 times in the last 7 years, for different reasons. We moved to Colorado once, the other company closed, but each time was just a new opportunity for me to find something maybe I'm a little more passionate about. And again, it's okay if you just want to work, at least try a company that you think is going to be a good fit, and maybe 6 months or a year after that you decide that's not the right fit, and you can find another company like that. There is nothing wrong with that, especially kind of early on. And I know a lot of people that work for a company right out of school and they don't really like it, and they just find another career. And I think that's also why it's so important to find like internships during school. You can do a little more experimenting on what field of civil engineering you can do or want to do.
So I'm looking for internships right now. But what would you say the best way of like making yourself stand out is? Because I assume like there are hundreds of people applying for these positions at like big companies like Lockheed Martin. But what would you put in the resume to make yourself stand out?
Are they doing career fairs, even like online at the university?
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously harder to do it online, but like something I like to do is I always brought with me like business cards. Like I know, I mean, I don't think any student will do that, but like have like a business card that is easy to hand out and something they can just put in their pocket and find. On my resume, like the main thing for me was highlighting my volunteering with Engineers Without Borders, because I know that's something that is not very typical in resumes, and that's something that's going to stand out. And I listed all the duties that I had when I was working on these projects. Like I was a project manager for one of the teams, so I was in charge of like the reports and all these things that students are not really like expected to do. So highlighting kind of your activities outside of classes, it's going to be very important if you don't have like any experience in the field. Showing like your classes, like what classes are they, like for example, when I was applying for structural engineer jobs, all my classes were like all the structural engineering classes I had taken, the concrete design, steel design, all of that, because I knew those were the classes they were looking for. And again, it comes back to finding the company you want to work for, looking at their website, looking at their job posting, and trying to match your resume as closely as possible to that resume. If you have the opportunity to talk to them, make a first great impression, and that's just going to give you the best chance to get hired. It's going to be harder, obviously, right now when everything is online, but I think it's still possible just to make a first good impression and show them you actually care about the company and you have done your research, and show them that you care about this position. Because a lot of people, they just go to these career fairs and start talking to people, and the first thing they ask is like, what does the company do, when you're supposed to already know that from the beginning.
Sweet. Does anyone else have any other questions off the thing?
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you very much for taking some time out of your day. That was very, very enlightening for me.
This is what I love to do the most, just help other students and young engineers. If you guys have been at the ASCE Career by Design, I was a topic moderator there, and that's kind of how I first decided to like start the podcast, because I was talking with a lot of people. They were like reaching out, asking all of these questions, and that's kind of how I started the podcast, just because I wanted to help students and help other young engineers answer those questions and talk with people that were working in the industry and doing some cool things. So that's how everything started. And if you don't know what Career by Design is, it's like an online group, like a Facebook group, like an online like community where you can just basically ask any question, and people from all over the US will answer your questions.